My lords and ladies, good gentles, all, welcome to the class on how to create an ad for the Black Star. I am Baroness Beatrix Fontaine. I was Kingdom Chronicler from 2021 to 2024, and I hope I can guide you effectively through this process. First of all, I would like to say thank you so much for stepping up as an autocrat. This is a really important leadership role, and events couldn't happen without your hard work. So let's get your event publicized and make sure that we get people invited to come to your event. Okay, where do you find your key information? All this information is available on the Chroniclers website off Ansteorra.org. First, go to the Ansteorra.org, go to the Officers tab, go to the Office of the Chronicler, and then there's a tab just for event ads, and that has all the information we're going to cover here in this class and the event ad checklist form that you absolutely need to be familiar with. So if you have any questions, first place you should go is that event ads tab on the Kingdom website for the Chronicler. So when do you have to get everything done? Let me just say, everything involved in an event ad is due on the first of the month before you host the event. So for example, for a February event, you should be working on the event ad during December so that it is submitted to the Kingdom Chronicler on January 1st. Why do we need it so early? Partly because the e-newsletters are published on the 11th of January, and then there are physical copies that are published after that. By the time that those physical copies get sent out to the people who have subscribed to them, we want to make sure that the people who are receiving the physical newsletters get the same information as those who get it electronically. And we don't want to talk about things that have already passed by the time that they get there. We need to make sure that things are timed just right for each newsletter. So that's why we need it by January 1st. The more that you can do ahead of time before the deadline of the first of the month makes the Kingdom Chronicler's job much easier. So when I say everything is due, what do I mean by everything? There are three things or sorts of things that you need to include in your event ad. First of all, you need your event ad. You need to send that in PDF format so that it's consistent. And we know it can be opened by a variety of different programs. We also need a checked off and signed event ad checklist by the group Seneschals. We'll talk more about that later. And then we also need artistic releases for any art that is used. If we're missing any of these elements, your Kingdom Chronicler cannot publish this event ad. And so that's going to slow down the process and possibly put your event at risk. So one of the things you need to ask yourself is, do you want a full page ad or a half page ad? All ads have to be published before the event takes place. So if it's a March event, an event ad is being published for the first time in a March newsletter, then chances are you're going to want to do a full page ad. If you're wanting to submit it early, so we say, hey, we'd like to advertise our event for multiple months, then you need to provide the option to the Kingdom Chronicler of having either a full page ad, which is our 7.5 by 10 inches. So there should be a 1/2 inch border all around the outside. Instead, you have a half page ad. This isn't tall, skinny half page. It's short and wide half page. So 7.5 inches wide, so the width stays the same, but only half as tall. If you're open to the possibility of having your half page ad satisfy that full advertising requirement, you need to make sure that your half page ad, to quote unquote count, needs to have all of the required information that we're going to talk about in a minute. People sometimes ask, well, if it's a half page ad, do I have to include everything? Like, yes. Please try to get all your information for your event ads into either a half page or a full page. One thing you may or may not know about the Kingdom newsletter is we are restricted in our number of pages. It must be exactly 16 pages, no more, no less. So if we have a whole bunch of events that month, you may be asked to submit a half page ad as your primary ad because we just have so many that need to fit into that newsletter. On the other hand, sometimes we have plenty of space, and so full page ads for everybody. So the more options that you provide your Kingdom Chronicler, the easier it makes their life. So please try to create both a full page and half page ad for your event. Now, this is the checklist. This is your guide to your event ad requirements. It's available online through the Kingdom Chronicler website under the Event Ads tab. Read it, use it, love it. This is the checklist that you need to use. I'm just going to summarize a lot of that for you at this point. What is the required content? And this is stuff I would like to think is sort of obvious that you would want to include in your invitation to your event, but sometimes people forget little details. So I'm just writing them down for you so that you know what's expected. When is your event taking place? We need the modern day, month, and year. Then we also need to know when. We need to know what time site opens and what time site closes. Basically, this is telling people how early are they allowed to arrive and expect to be able to check in at gate, be able to start setting up things, and when do they need to leave? When does site close to the public so that your event site team can start tearing stuff down and putting things away and you can sort of shove them out the door. So make sure you have this information very clearly presented. Then also we need to know who is hosting this event. It can be any kind of sponsoring group. So are you a shire? Are you a canton? Are you a barony? Are you the principality? Are you a province? Are you the whole kingdom? As long as it is an SCA affiliated branch of one level or another, that is the information we need. So even if it's being primarily run by a particular household, that kind of thing, you still need to have a sponsoring SCA branch. And that needs to be listed in your event ad. We also need contact information for your event steward. What's their name? How can we get a hold of them? I recommend doing phone numbers and email addresses so that we have two forms of communication for each person in case one goes down. Not everybody feels comfortable with that. I'm very sorry. But you need to provide at least two independent, separate ways of communicating with the event stewards. Again, in case of emergency, in case there's a problem, make sure you have multiple ways to communicate. So we've got when, and who, and then finally where. What is the location? We'd like, ideally, a street address, city, state, and zip code, so people can find it on a map. And speaking of maps, another thing that's required is, do you have a map? Or turn-by-turn directions. Now, part of this is the idea that we want people to be able to take your Blackstar ad and be able to find their way to your site without any other outside resource. They get in the car 5 o'clock on Friday for their work day, or 6 o'clock in the morning on Saturday if they're going to day trip the event. They have a printed out copy of your event ad or find it on the website. They look at it and they don't have to like, oh, but we have to look at this other resource. Oh, we have to load up our GPS. People should be able to find your event purely from these directions. Again, this can be a map, which can be either hand-drawn or electronically drawn, but they cannot be commercially drawn. You have to know the person who designed the map, so that then they can provide an artist release for that information. If you can't get that information, you can't use the map. This includes, some sites include hand-drawn maps for, hey, this is how you get around our site. You may not copy those maps because you don't know who the artist is and you cannot check with the artist to say, hey, can we have your permission? If by some chance you do know who the artist is and you can check, awesome, then include an artist release so that you can use their artwork. But just because something is published on the internet with the website of the site that you're using or published in a brochure for the site that you're using does not give us permission to use that map in our own advertisement. So make sure if you're doing a map that you know the person who drew it. If you don't do a map, we need directions, verbal turn-by-turn directions. And a key thing you need to understand is, can a newcomer who's never been to your event before find their way safely to your site? And you may know the way blindfolded, but you're inviting friends who've never been. And you want to have more people who've never been to your event before be able to come and make it and not be like, look, I'm just lost. I don't know where I am. Right? That doesn't feel very welcoming. Another thing to note about these directions is, don't assume that everyone comes to site from the same starting place. As an example, imagine that there's a site just north of Oklahoma City, and the hosts want to give directions to that site, and so they give turn-by-turn directions, and they start it just from downtown Oklahoma City. That assumes that everyone is going to want to drive to downtown Oklahoma City first before they come to the event site. Now, people living in Stillwater, Oklahoma, which is north of Oklahoma City, are not going to want to have to drive all the way down to Center City in order to find their way to site. So make sure that you're also taking into consideration that you may have people coming from multiple directions, not just, oh, well, they're just all going to start in this closest major metropolitan area. Make sure you include those options or give directions that are specific enough that they can find their way from, like, get to this exit, right? Just be considerate of that people may be coming from multiple directions. All right, more required content. Money matters. As long as people are having to pay to attend your event, you need to include a make checks payable to SCA Incorporated and then group name, whoever the hosting group is, whatever bank account is receiving the money. If, on the other hand, it's a free event, people just come, it's in a public park, whatever, you don't have to include this text, and you don't have to include registration because it's free. The other thing is, what is the money that people pay to be at your event and get their site token? The technical term for this is registration. We cannot use the word site fee, we cannot say cost, we cannot say price. We are only allowed to use the term registration. And along with this, we have the specific delineations for different groups. Adult registration is for the general public. Adult member discount registration is the reduced rate that people pay as members, which, remember now, the difference between adult registration and member discount registration is now $10. It used to be $5. So make sure that you've got that amount correct. Some people have registration required for minors. Some don't, but if you do have minors, you can either just say minors, so anyone 18 or under, or if you're going to do separate categories for different age groups, you use child for the older age group of minors. So if you want to do like 12 to 18, And then youth would be those younger than a particular age. A lot of times people talk about there being a family max. That would be 2 adult registrations and then 1 adult discount registration. That is your family max. And that really only applies if you have multiple adults in a single place, but you can only have 1 additional adult. Otherwise, it has to be the minors that would fall into that family max. So you only can have 2 adults and then 1 extra adult that can count as a family, quote unquote. You start getting like 5 adults, you have to pay the adult rate for all 5 people. If you have any questions about the registration rates and how it breaks down, all that kind of thing, this is how it was explained to me by my Kingdom treasurer. If you have questions about this, I recommend you talk to your treasurer or your upline, the regional treasurer or principality treasurer, or the Kingdom treasurer to help clarify all these issues for you. So if you have questions, talk to the treasurer about the money matters. But as far as my office is concerned, the Office of Chronicler, this is the format you need to be using. Another thing, since we were talking about minors, we must have this disclaimer about minors. Use this exact wording, please. I did not write it. This was handed down to us from society. Please just include this word for word. Summarizations or reinterpretations with using other phrasing is not acceptable. That's all the required content. That's it. There are other things that you could potentially include that would be helpful, that would be supportive of having people come to your event and feel welcome and feel prepared. So here are a couple suggestions of things that people commonly ask about when doing preparation for attending an event. What about pets? A lot of people have dogs and love their dogs and would love to bring their dogs to your event. Is that okay with you? Is that okay with your site? If it's not, you need to make that absolutely clear. If it is, you might want to make that clear too, so people feel comfortable bringing their pets. What about alcohol? The 3 main ways that people express the sort of different levels of alcohol permission is it a dry site? So alcohol is not permitted. Do not bring alcohol to site. Do not consume alcohol on site. It's dry. The second category would be in-period containers. So that usually means you can drink alcohol, but if it's wine, pour it into a goblet. If it's beer, pour it into a mug. If it's mixed drinks, pour it into an appropriately sized chalice, right? Don't have people drinking beer straight out of the can. Try not to have mundane drinking vessels be the primary thing that's seen. Let's try to maintain our medieval atmosphere. And then the last category is the wet site. Bring your alcohol, consume it however you wish, don't worry about it. Also, people are concerned about food, how they're going to get food when they're at the event. Is there a feast? Is there a sideboard or tavern? Is any of this included in their registration, or is there an extra cost? Also, there are some sites that do not allow outside food at all, and that would be very important to include in your event ad. If you have someone, a feast steward, who's organizing feast or sideboard or tavern, right, providing food from within the SCA organization, it really helps to provide contact information for that person so that guests can contact them to ask about allergen issues or various other things like that. So that's a very helpful piece of information to include. Do you have an event website? I am wonderful friends with our Kingdom Web Minister, and she is strongly encouraging people to start work on their event site right away and have that be the primary place for information dissemination about your event. Having that well in place before your event ad goes in the Black Star is A-okay, and make sure you include the URL so that people can get more information about your event other than just from the event ad. And then what else might an attendee want to know about the site? Is it primitive? Are there showers? Are there flush toilets? Is there rough ground? Should people bring their own chairs? Will people bring their own shade? If people want to bring pavilions, will they be able to put in heavy stakes to hold those giant pavilions up? Those are the sorts of things that people often ask about, and that it would be helpful for you to share in the event ad. So then here are some format suggestions. Is your text large enough that it can be easily read? I recommend larger than 10 point as an absolute minimum. Is the font easy to read? We have some beautiful calligraphy style fonts that you can just download off the internet and use everywhere to give this a really historic feel. However, sometimes it makes the key information you're trying to share difficult to read. So it may be a better choice to use modern sans serif fonts or things like Times New Roman for your main important information so that it's really easy for people to find it and know what you're saying. Then can people find the key information easily? Is it right up there in front? Is it front and center in your ad, or has it been squished down in a corner or written in small font? You're trying to make sure that the information that you have is easily available. And then if you have directions, are they good directions? Are they vague? Do they give mileage distances? Do they give landmarks to watch out for? All these sorts of things can help people find their way to your event as safely and efficiently as possible. Okay, so you've got your ad. It's all created. How do you submit it? First of all, make sure you double check the document size. Does it fit the requirements for either a full page or a half page ad? Then make sure it's saved in PDF format. And make sure you use the group name as part of your file title. When the Kingdom Chronicler is starting to consolidate the files, it's a whole bunch of event ads. So it's just saying event ad 2024 is really not helpful when everybody's doing an event ad. That is the whole point of it. So having your group name helps the Kingdom Chronicler remember whose ad are they working on right now. Next, you need to include an artist release for all the artwork. That includes clip art and graphics and borders and maps and anything that you can think of. This is available under the Kingdom Chronicler website in the Forms and Publications section. Again, if you know the artist, you need an artist release. Having found it on a website is not enough. However, if the image is advertised as public domain or in Creative Commons or free for use, make sure that when you submit your ad, in the body of the email, you can say graphics from such and such website, free of use, right? Cite your sources. We also need that signed event ad checklist. Again, this is also on the Ansteorra Chronicler website. Look under the event ads tab. It's all over in red highlighted hyperlink. Please take the time before you submit it to make sure that your ad is complete. I know we're in a hurry to try to meet our deadline and try to check this thing off our checkbox, but it only is going to make the process longer if you have to go back and fix things multiple times, and if the Kingdom Chronicler has to double check your work also to make sure it's complete. So remember, incomplete ads are going to be returned and you'll have to do them again. Finally, you've got your ad, it's all submitted. Send all of your files to kingdom@chronicler.ansteorra.org. The preference is that this comes directly from the Seneschals, since they're sort of the last ones who are supposed to have looked at it and made sure that it has all the required content. It also helps if you CC the event stewards, so that then if there's any kind of problem, the Kingdom Chronicler can also communicate with the event stewards without having to search around to find their contact information, or try to send corrections to the Seneschal, who's then having to contact the event stewards, and it kind of becomes a game of telephone. Please send before the 1st of the month if possible. I'd like the 1st to be the absolute deadline for when you can submit event ads. So if you're done on the 25th, submit it on the 25th. Don't wait around for the 1st. So for a quick sum up, use your event ad checklist. You should start with having the ad designer using it, and then the event stewards, and then your Seneschal needs to double check and sign it. The Seneschals become sort of my little deputy for that one time, and because presumably the Seneschal is deeply involved in the organization of the event, they would also know how to fill in the blanks if anything is missing. So that's part of why it's really important to have the Seneschal really check over the ad. Make sure you get release forms for your artwork, or at least you can document the permissions and the sources if you're in public domain. And then make sure you email all of this to the Kingdom Chronicler before the 1st of the month, before you want the event published. So thank you so much for coming and attending this class. I hope you've learned a little bit, and happy event organizing.